Hello, you handsome humans, and welcome to the Wenner Folsom battle-tested Resiliency podcast. And we're going to do a little deep dive on one of the most important aspects of humanity that we have lost in our current culture of not only veterans, men, first responders, and this big issue which drives resiliency, incredibly important, is the topic of initiation.
And this is going to be in everybody listening's households. It's going to be in your work environments. It's rampant through our society. So when we start to unpack this, you're going to see how this shows up everywhere and what you can start to do to immediately start to become more aware of this. And that awareness gives you power.
Okay, so just to give you a 20,000 foot frame on the idea of initiation, everybody is obviously, when we're young, we're in that developmental stage where we need to be protected, we need to be domesticated, and that's generally done in our mother's house, and that's the job of the mother. And then at some point, particularly for young men, we have to be moved from our mother's house to our father's house. And that is an initiation or a rite of passage, because psychologically, when we are in our mother's house, we're being taken care of. We're looking for external validation. We're looking for external support. We're doing a lot of things that are inherently adolescent, right? Because we are. As soon as we move into our father's house or we move into an adult psychology, then we start putting aside childish things. You know, that's a biblical quote. And we have to start now looking at what is the currency of an adult. And that currency is going to have to do with service, right? It means that you're now willingly putting aside our immediate gratification in order to have some long-term results about particularly things that are larger than ourself. And this initiation idea is universal in every culture, in every era, in every area of the world. We have always had initiation rituals, except recently, where post-industrial revolution, where we don't really get to see what our fathers or even our mothers are doing. Once they've gone into the workplace, we have now been cut off from our initiation rituals, and we're forced to muddle through this with an internal initiation or an impersonal social media initiation. And it's not working well because we never have this clear-cut moment of, I'm an adult and I can put aside childish things, and now I can start behaving in a manner that not only serves me, but serves my family, serves my society. And we can see the downstream impact of generations of leaders who are making self-serving decisions. And it has led us into a really, really socially damaging place. We're seeing the results of it, which are clinical anxiety, depression, addiction, suicide rates, just skyrocketing because we cannot continue to behave like adolescents and still move our society forward. So here we are. We're going to deep dive, unpack some of these ideas, but we can't leave it as ideas. We actually have to battle test these ideas and find out, well, how do I do that? How do I avoid making those mistakes? How do I become aware of that behavior? And this is one of the things that we're doing both in Valor, which is our resiliency program for veterans and first responders, but also in K4, and men in particular require initiation. Women seem to, in most cultures, almost self-initiate, although they certainly need some support and accountability to become full psychologically functional woman. But for men, mandatory.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's interesting is I think if anybody that's listening to this just takes a moment and thinks about your relationship with the masculine, with the father. What does that relationship look like? And if you think back, what has been the model or the example of men? Even if you look at emotionally, right? Like what are we looking at? We're looking at stoic, right? Non-reactive. If anything, what we have been taught is anger is the only emotion that's okay for a man to express, right? And it goes multi-generational. One thing you mentioned, Philip, which I really landed for me of understanding what happened, is if you think about it, like how much time did most people spend with their fathers? Like really getting to know what their dad's like. How does your dad show up if you had a father in the first place? And if you did, how did he show up? How did he interact with your friends, with his friends? How did they communicate together? When did they give each other a hard time? When did they have fun? Like, how did they show respect? Like, what did that look like? And for most of us, our fathers were busy working. So you saw little glimpses of the dad at the end of the day when he was tired and frustrated and, maybe he was angry, irritable, numbing, avoiding, whatever was going on. Those little clips of him were a couple on the weekends. And Philip mentioned it earlier. What used to happen is we used to be in tribes where there was a clean break about 12, 13 years old where the boys were taken, and actually even the women would get involved in like resist. And so there's a big dramatic event where they would steal the boys and they would take them on a rite of passage, which was a clean break from the mother for like 18 months. And during that time, you were just around men all day long, all the men of the tribe, uncles, and you got to see how they interacted. You got to see what they did on their downtime. You got to see them play. You got to see them have fun. You got to see them hunt, and they learned from each other. And what men did was they used stories to teach the boys how to become men. And these stories have been passed down for generation upon generation. That was a tradition or a ritual. This is how you initiate men. You show them the stories of our ancestors, and we model through different archetypal expressions. This is what a powerful man looks like. What was that?
Norms. You are given
Norms.
the operating system of a full man. It's almost a secret behavior set. Like, hey, now you come into this field of masculinity. And we both had it as veterans. That is a form of initiation, is to go through boot camp or to go through basic training. If you did high-level athletics, when you go through spring training and two-a-days, like there is still some shadow initiation processes, and you'll notice that they're all honor-based cultures, right? And this is one of the things that we talk about is, we have our honor-based cultures and we have our pride-based cultures, which is the civilian world that we're all embedded in. Honor-based cultures always have some form of initiation. And that's that moment where you get given the operating system or the norms or the collective stories of men, of those people.
I think as you're talking about it, Philip, there's this spectrum of you have high leadership and then you have high resiliency. And when you look at the spectrum, those that are like, let's say high leadership, low resiliency, if it's like on XY axis, those that are high leadership tend to be more the traditional forms of that, whether it's military, where they push you over that edge and they train you to be strong. They train you not to give into your emotions. They train you to like really handle it, right? They condition you, they train you into it. And then I'd say the flip side of that is the high resiliency, low leadership are going to be ones that's a little bit more really gentle and present and aware of resiliency, but they're a little bit more coddling, I guess is part of how I interpret that, Philip. How would you see the high resiliency, low leadership? Like I have a little bit of judgment that I'm still working through on that. But that's how I tend to see it, as a little bit more, you see hugging circles or you see overly stuff that's a little bit too intense, but I know there's a place for it.
Well, there is a ritual of the death of the boy that has to happen. You don't get to have both. You don't get to be safe and vulnerable and sensitive and coddled and then still be able to do those incredibly hard things that men are required to do. That's the reality. You don't get to have both of those things. So there is always some form of death involved when you kill the boy. You get a ritual scarring, you get a tooth knocked out, you get a tattoo, even a baptism. That is not a blessing. It's a ritual drowning. You are killing the person so they can be reborn again, right? So all of these initiations and these rites of passage involve the death of the older operating system. So you don't have conflict happening, which we do now, is that I want to be a man and I want to serve and I want to be honorable and powerful. Oh, but I still want to be able to play video games. It's like, no, you don't. One of those things is going to cost you the other. And there is a strange nebulous space where particularly men are caught now, desperately wanting to be significant and build legacy, but they're unwilling to give up their childish behaviors. And so there does have to be something that is robust that is involved in the initiation process.
And I agree with that wholeheartedly. Again, I was raised in more I'd say the high leadership with athletics and military and a lot of that. But I do see a lot of this men's workspace bubbling up where there's really high resiliency. How do you interpret that? Like, is that maybe they're doing their own death, but they're doing it more emotional? Like, or they're doing it where they maybe lead with emotion and that's just how it's perceived in the industry? Because I think people are thinking about that going like, how do I understand? Are they still doing a form of initiation? Or is it potentially on that coddling area where they're a little bit too coddling the boy versus actually giving a safe space for the man to move through?
And I think this is one of the things we really want to talk about is how do we change, I'm referring to as an operating system or a psychological state. We could call this a belief system. We could call it, what is your story of the world, your point of view, whatever you want to call that. That's your psychological state. And that's a very uncomfortable place to move through. In the hero's journey, that is the abyss. And it's dark and it's scary because the death of your old system leads there to be this sense of nothingness. Like, who am I? If I don't have that story, who am I? And it's not one of those things that we can do alone. We cannot get pushed across the abyss into a new way of being alone because it involves the death of self. And we won't do that. And Viktor Frankl said that the line between good and evil, life and death, runs through the heart of every man, and who would willingly kill half of their own heart? That is the initiation process. And one of the reasons why we have lost it completely is that we're so isolated as men, and we have such little accountability that we don't have those men who are going to push us over the goal line. It's too easy to run. You can always find something to soothe or numb or distract or avoid. I mean, how easy is this? You just get to go on your journey. So we will head for the exits. Men run or boys run. And so unless you have good men guarding the exits, we will always run. We'll find some way out. And so being involved in a structure of masculine, evolved men who will hold space for you to go across that threshold, that's a rare thing. And it's really what I think the men's community is doing currently. And it's a really, really powerful moment. Just how is that place met? And is there results? Now, and let's get to the battle tested. What's on the other side? What are the behaviors on the other side of initiation? And what are the behaviors on the current state of masculinity? Let's take a look at that real quick.
Hey, we thank you for listening to the Wenner Folsom podcast. Just a couple quick notes. First, if you are a man and you're looking for an honorable and inspiring group of men to hold you accountable and challenge you to grow in your relationships, your fitness, your finances, and your life, go to www.k4men.com. And if you are a veteran, first responder, or man or woman who deals with trauma, and you are looking for some resiliency tools and skills for you, your team, or your organization, go to valorresiliency.com. Hope to see you there. Back to the podcast.
So uninitiated behavior, right? Dysfunctional, short-term, immediate gratification. What does that look like for you?
I'm actually still on the leadership resiliency. So is that just something you want to table for now and come back to later? Because I was asking a direct question to get your thoughts on it, and then I just felt we skipped over it. So I'm still trying to process how, were you giving a story to help me understand your perspective in that leadership resiliency? Or were you saying, let's talk about another subject and then come back to that later? Because that's where I was understanding what you're saying.
Why high resiliency people are not initiated?
Yeah, I was wanting to understand, because we see it in that spectrum of high leadership, high resiliency in the space. And I was curious, like, for somebody listening to go, is everybody doing initiation? Is everybody doing a different form of it? And it just works a little bit differently and how they see the world? Is it high leadership's trying to initiate men by pushing them over the edge, essentially, and going, we need to make you a man and give you that wound and knock the shit out of you, if you will, to make you stand up? And is the other high resiliency saying, hey, we need to actually bring you in and nurture you and bring you a little bit? I'm just trying to, I guess I'm exploring it with you, the exploration of those two different extremes, because we're in the middle of that.
Are the men who are going through the work, whatever your work is, are they coming out better? And by better, I mean more capable of serving. Are they more capable of leading? Do they have more physical, financial, spiritual awareness, power, that when they return from their experience, are they elevating their families and their communities and their companies? That would be the question. At the end of whatever that experience is with a resiliency program or a leadership program, what is the behavior of the people?
I think anybody that's looking at that, let's go of some of the judgment of how the effectiveness or what tools somebody's using or their methodology, and just more look at the results of the men or women coming back. And to your point, Philip, if they are integrating, then it works, whatever's out there. And if it's not, then at some level, the methodology is not working. That really answered my question.
I'm really looking at when, and we're talking about men here and male initiation, but it doesn't have to necessarily be, but this is the men's movement right now. And Are those men moving into positions of service when they return home? Because that's how we return with treasure, is that I'm able to take this newfound vitality that I have and revitalize my community and my family. And a lot of that has to do with money. That's one thing we don't really talk about in the men's work, because money is somehow evil. It's like, no, it's not. Money is a form of energy. And if you have no energy, you cannot serve. You have no impact. There is a reality to that. There's also the power of position. Am I moving into a leadership position in my company, in my community, in local government? Like, am I starting to move into those positions so that I can affect more vitality throughout the world? And I think that's one of the marks of a successful initiation, is that you're now prepared to serve. It's always hard. Service is hard. It's brutal. Heavy lies the crown.
Is it fair to say, too, the general theme, we've talked a lot about the difference between adolescent and adult, let's call it male, is the difference of avoiding discomfort versus intentionally choosing discomfort? And is that another fair sign if somebody comes back from a program and initiation? Are they actually choosing to, for example, instead of spending more time watching video games, watching TV, numbing out through addictions or whatever that may look like, where they're just trying to get out of some discomfort to do the thing, that they're actually choosing to go, you know what? I'm going to delay this uncomfortable feeling that I have, or I'm going to go invest in a diet, and get in good shape. I'm going to go start training at the gym. Instead of watching TV, I'm going to start reading books to elevate my mind. I may spend time with my family, or I'm going to actually choose to do the things and be present and engage with life, or to show up to serve. Even though I don't get out of that pain now, I'm going to do it in the future, and I'm going to lean into that. So another indicator somebody could look at is, hey, is somebody actually moving out of that adolescent, which is trying to avoid the pain by doing the thing, which is actually avoidance, or are they actually moving into intentionally leaning into discomfort to serve at a greater capacity? So another question to pay attention to.
That deferred gratification, the ability to defer your immediate gratification, that's the marker of maturity. Are you able to take on a certain amount of short-term discomfort in order to do something that is larger in the future? And ultimately, that larger thing is something larger than yourself. That's where we get into the service conversation, is whatever you're doing, even if it is making a short-term investment for some long-term outcome, that needs to be connecting to other people, society. And again, our old indigenous systems, they absolutely recognize that they are coming from a long line of resilient and altruistic ancestors who made sacrifices so that we can be here. And it's our duty to continue that sacrifice for further generations. And in a lot of Native American and North American culture, it's every decision you make should take into account the 7 generations following you. Like, that's a very mature service-based philosophy, as opposed to, I really want to, numb out for an hour on Instagram on death scrolling. Like, what is that? What a waste of an hour. We have the luxury of doing. I would propose that men don't. You don't have the luxury of doing that.
And if they do, they're just choosing to be lazy. In a certain sense, they don't want to do the hard thing, and they're choosing to be lazy, which is accepting back to a boy. That's what a boy does. A boy doesn't want responsibility. A boy will just be in the moment and essentially do what he wants to do because he's about himself. He still hasn't achieved the fortitude or the maturity mentally to actually serve something greater than himself. And the irony that I'm finding is, I think a lot of us as men want freedom, but I know the more I learn, and I know we talk about this a lot in our communities, is it actually gets harder.
Oh, yeah.
Right? As you build capacity to hold more, to serve more, it actually gets harder, not easier. And so you actually intentionally lean into the harder. It's harder to continually save when you increase the amount that you make for the future. It's harder to continue to eat the right foods and not get swayed by sugar and all the shit out there. It's harder to intentionally continue to level up your relationship and have date nights and create passion on a busy schedule, right? It's intentionally hard when you have more children.
What do you get for the harder? What's the payoff?
The payoff for the harder is you get a sense of, 1, service. You get to give, you get to feel what you give. And then 2, you get legacy, purpose, meaning out of life. That's what makes suffering worth living for, is meaning and purpose.
Bingo. That's the solution. For all you guys, people watching who are like, what's the fucking point? Okay, that's the point. The point is finding meaning and purpose and legacy and service in all of that suffering that is inherent in life. That's the payoff, right? And it's exciting. I mean, it's an exciting world to be, when I'm at my best and I am, doing those things that I'm supposed to be doing. I have this rock solid sense of optimism. It feels like I'm being carried by God. I absolutely is a incredibly robust, positive experience. And when I'm being a dick and doing my little small boy shit, man, I have this sense of creeping dread that is just pervasive. I'm like, oh man. So I want to get some examples. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one too. Some of the rampant adolescent behavior in men these days. Anyone who doesn't return their shopping cart to the front of the store because you're too lazy to actually walk your cart back, I think you lose your man card right there. You are now an adult male. Congratulations. Now, if you want to be a man, you want to get your card back, walk the fucking cart back to where it's supposed to be. A little ticky-tack, right? How about the guys that drive around with their fucking loud music on all the time because they think that the rest of the world wants to hear your music? Some adolescent shit right there. Men on phone conversations at the gym. Blah, 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 blah. And then she said, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, dude, what the fuck?
Or why they're driving.
Oh, dude.
On the phone while driving or texting while driving.
You'd have lost your man card right there. If you are a male who has drive ever on your phone, when you are piloting a large vehicle around children, that's the world, because it's convenient for you and you don't want to pull over or you don't want to defer that gratification, lost your man card. These are all adolescent behaviors.
And again, it's been my shift on food after I've done a lot of shift in my body. And so for me, my resistance to actually make food, go to the store, buy food, plan my meals, and actually prepare food, I feel like it's the same thing. I was just waiting for a partner, which is being a child, saying like, oh, I need a mother to make me food. And so instead I would order it out or order all my meals. And so actually taking the time to go, I'm going to choose what I'm going to put in my body and I'm going to find a way to go get it done.
If we were like on a football team together or we're going to war or something, and we're not optimizing our health or our finances or our skill sets, or if we're not being sharp, we are again abdicating our responsibility as men. Like, men need to be able to do the hard things. We need to keep those skills that degrade. Perishable skills need to be maintained. We need to be psychologically, emotionally, financially, physically healthy. It's a duty to do all these things. That is your duty to your society, to your children. And yeah, you might have taken on a bad operating system from your family, society, or your dad, whatever the story is. You got to break that fucking curse. Break the curse and then, do it for your children and the rest of your neighbors and coworkers who are watching you. That's your legacy. Like, as if we do it, all the other men in our world are like, okay, that's available. That's possible. That would be my battle-tested marching orders for the day, if we were to give our viewers a challenge for the week until we see you again.
I really love this conversation of what are all the ways it shows up as men and adolescent. I'd love to add just a couple more, because if a couple of those didn't land with somebody, I know we're about what we call a man in full, and a man in full is constantly focused on leveling up his career, his finances, his spiritual practice, his relationship, and his health and his fitness. And so for me, the opposite of all those is adolescent behavior, of a man who's accepting stagnation. A man, like an example I've heard, I'm single, I'm in the dating world, and I can't tell you how many women I've met that tell me there are men that will let themselves just be taken care of by a partner, and literally the partner's driving everything. So a man that just sits at home and doesn't go out and find a way to break through, or even is, let's say, entrepreneurial, but doesn't find out a way to go get a job and provide no matter what, like, to me is adolescent. I'd say the same thing health-wise, and this may come across critical or judgmental, but I'm saying it because I care. Like, the guys that don't invest to take care of their health and make their health a priority and make time to exercise daily and put healthy food in, and instead will settle for just whatever is easy, like adolescent. That's what a child does. A child says, give me the shit food.
I want to put Lunchables in my face hole. Like, oh God, stop it. Stop it. As a man, like on a football team or any honor-based thing, you can't eat Lunchables, dudes. Stop the pizza. That you cannot perform. You cannot hunt with us. Like, we need you better. Like, we need everybody, all the men watching this, we need you better as a society.
two more is when it comes to finances, Philip talked about, we need to make money and we need to value this. So it also rings true. I see a lot of men complain about money and they're out going on trips. They're spending every dollar they make. They spend money on trips. They're the guys that go on the most trips. They spend the most amount going to dinners and they have no money all the time because they're not committing to saving money. And if you want to do something, plan for it. Like to me, just doing it and spending it on credit cards is adolescent. Like it's like, I want it now versus I want to earn it and work for it. And here's the big key. And it took me a long time to learn, but pay yourself first. If you're not saving out of everything you make for yourself, you're never going to be wealthy. You're going to end up 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years old and broke. And so if you start now, wherever you are, you're building a retirement for yourself, save it. You're going to spend your life working, save it, investing in you. So you have it. So, and also I'd say choosing to become financially free, having abundant mindset is what an adult man gets to create. A child will continually blame somebody else. So the villain, victim, savior, we'll talk about more as we get on here. Somebody who continually blames somebody for why he's not getting the results, to me is adolescent as well. It's like, oh, I don't have it because of X, versus just own it and go find a way, right? There's allies, mentors, community, resources, tools, anything you can find. And it's going to be hard and it's going to suck and you're going to make a lot of mistakes, but you'll eventually get there if you start to use battle-tested systems and structure by men who are doing it that can help lead you to where you need to go. And so find a mentor, find a community, whether it's in our community or another one where men are actually showing up, serving each other, getting results, and have a bunch of members in the community willing to help you. Men want to help, but you can't do it on your own. Also, adolescent is the lone wolf. We talk about this a lot. I used to see that as what a strong man does until, Philip, we started talking and doing a lot of work around men's work and learned about wolves. And really the lone man is the adolescent man who's going to die because he has no community and he's in a constant trauma response of fear. And adult men have healthy friendships and community, and they're excellent at building teams, culture, community, surrounding themselves by men who elevate them. And so if not, you're still in that adolescent psychology.
There it is. Challenge, find a community of men who you aspire to emulate or have the qualities that are mature. All those things we're talking about. And the places that I have found them, jiu-jitsu gyms seem to be filled with the best men I know. And I think we could do a whole episode on why that is. But men, you probably have a jiu-jitsu school, and my guesses are it's probably filled with some good men who are willing to make that sacrifice of that experience, that technology. Obviously, there's a lot of men's groups. Find one that has the vision and values that match your own, right? Whether that be political or spiritual or practical and tactical, find a men's group. There's one for you. Those would be my edges. You got a couple?
Yeah, I'd say just find a hobby that lights you up. If you like to camp or hunt or fish or, bike, cycle, whatever it is, find a hobby you're passionate about and find community. Reach out who inspires you and reach out and start to build some healthy community that'll challenge you to become better.
And hey, the easiest first step that most of us have found to start claiming that mature ownership or responsibility is your body. It's the easiest one you can control. Control what you're eating, right? Control your exercise, that's where it starts for most of us. That upgraded story starts permeating in the other houses of like, oh, if I can do it with my body, I can do it with my bank account. If I can do it with my bank account, I can do it with my career. If I can do it with, so get in the gym first, take a look at what you're eating, stand naked in front of the mirror, and upgrade that operating system first, right? That's battle-tested advice right there from both of us.
So accept the challenge, go get busy this week, go start to find a community of men that you can elevate yourself to be around, and we'll see you on the next podcast.